The Inbetweeners ran from 2008 to 2010. It stars Simon Bird, James Buckley, Blake Harrison, and Joe Thomas as the four main characters. The series was about four high school students trying to cope with the constant mishaps of everyday life, as well as trying to break free from their perceived nerdy personas. The show got an American remake in 2012 on MTV, but was canceled shortly for, frankly, sucking. I didn't have many expectations going into this. In fact, it took me a couple of months to even start watching it after I put it in my queue on Netflix. And how did it turn out? Well, if any of you imaginary subscribers have seen the video, British versus American comedy, what's the difference? From the YouTuber Now You See It, then you would know that British comedy is much more miserable and pessimistic than your average American sitcom. The whole video draws comparisons of both the American and British versions of the show The Office, stating that the American version sees the main character as someone who everyone acknowledges is different, but applauds and laughs with him, while the British version describes the main protagonist as an outcast, someone who tries to fit in, but has little to no success. The Inbetweeners takes the basic principles of the UK's The Office and maximizes them in every way. I mean, my God, this show is so incredibly hard to watch at times because of how sadistically these four young men get treated. It's like the world just uses them as its own personal toilet. That's not to say it can't be funny or that they didn't deserve it at times, but seriously, they get harassed mentally, physically, emotionally, sometimes all at once. And the show is rated mature, so there is no holding back. The format is fine, with no legitimate criticisms there, although throughout Season 1 there were times when the camera would just cut to a zoom of the same frame, and it was really distracting once I noticed it. But luckily they fixed that problem in the subsequent seasons and movies. So let's talk about the characters. Well, for starters, Will, the most focused on of the four, is likable. He does say some arrogant things sometimes, but they all come from places that have good intent, trying to correct misinformed or stupid people, or people who deserve just a good talk down. And he is, for the most part, charmingly dorky. Next is Simon, who is kind of cool. For the entirety of the series, he has a massive crush on this girl, which does two things for him. One, it limits his ability to be as crazy and outlandish as the rest of the gang, which can be disappointing. And two, it makes him so stupid, it makes him do stupidly ridiculous things that a rational person wouldn't otherwise do. The second thing especially makes for some downright hilarious comedy, and I was very entertained for the most part. I wish that during the run of the series he would have had some growth and realized that Carly, his crush, was no good for him, but that does eventually happen in the first movie, which I will talk about in another review. But Simon does have some genuinely heartfelt moments with his friends, learning that he'd be nothing without them. The next two are Jay and Neil, who, sadly, fall into being archetypes. Those archetypes being the sex-obsessed womanizer and the kind but misinformed idiot, which honestly got a bit grating after a while. I wish there would have been an episode where they had some actual character development, even if it was just one of them. Not to say that character development in the series is completely absent. For instance, we do get a sense of why Jay, the sex-obsessed one, acts the way he does. Because his father is constantly berating him and lowering his self-esteem, so he has to act overly confident in order to fill his empty, shallow heart. And that's the next point I want to make with this series. The parents in the show were oddly outlandish and cartoonish. At points, they felt less like parents and more like motivators for the boys' crazy and dangerous misadventures. There were times where the parents had some funny moments, like the running gag that Neil's dad is a pedophile, or all the crude remarks made at Will's mom for being incredibly attractive. The adventures they had were pretty investing, I don't think there is one in the show that I particularly hated. Eventually it would get a bit repetitive, but overall I would recommend The Inbetweeners. It was a fine show with likable characters and clever writing. It had several funny moments with only a few, downright hilarious moments. If it seems like your cup of tea, check it out. 7.5 out of 10.